Fundamentally, the number one priority, without any doubt, is to provide solutions which are bespoke to their own requirements and around their own environment at the end of the day. Now, importantly, financial institutions, or often institutions linked to governments, they are highly exposed to cyber threats already today. Having said that, you would think that financial stakeholders would also be very interested in general in cyber risks. They should be very interested in. I'm afraid, however, too often, these risks are highly underestimated or not appreciated at the moment. And what really should be done is three things. Number one, any financial institution or any government should first of all identify, evaluate, and try to quantify its cyber threats, its cyber risks. Once they have done so, they should think about how can they measure particularly these risks in a cybersecurity framework. And thirdly, then to think about how can they potentially transfer some of these risks to third parties, whether it is external financial institutions or at the end of the day they might be insurance. Overall, the solution needs to end that whatever they put in place, they need to stress test top down and not bottom up, because this particular risk is a pure board risk at the end, or a pure minister level risk. I want to talk about new cybercrimes overall, right? I think the important thing is that you look at your own risk landscape and you judge which risks are relevant to you. Now, fact is, we have spoken about distributed denial of service attacks, ransomware attacks in the past. What has changed, however, is really the frequency and the potential severity of this kind of risk classes at the moment. Now, let me give you an example. Over the last 10 years, what we did around the world on a global basis, we added around approximately 2 billion new users of the internet. If you add 2 billion of new users in the internet, what you do is you provide more digital access. But through digital access, you provide digital inclusion. And through digital inclusion, you get financial inclusion. And through financial inclusion, you get social inclusion. If you close this particular triangle at the end, this leads into certain parties who have an interest. These parties are intruders, potential criminals, and sometimes they're even state-sponsored actors. And they focus on what? They focus today on data, they focus on revenues, they focus on just simply creating havoc and creating chaos. And that has changed. The risk in itself hasn't massively changed, it's just the way people are going to be attacked today. Well, first of all, if we look at financial institutions, in particular governments, then they're fundamentally a different risk than other institutions or other industries are. The first thing they should do is they should try to get a better understanding of the cyberspace. Because fundamentally, if you understand the cyberspace in your institution or in your country, then particularly you also have already a good understanding specifically where attacks could come from, where the threats are coming from. Now, the important thing is that risks are interdependent, that risks are interconnected. And that means at the end, you need to be able to develop something which really is truly what I call bespoke to your country or to your financial institution. And whatever you put in place, don't forget one thing, stress test this. As an example, if you're a minister, if you're an executive at a bank, what needs to be done is that these particular solutions which are put in place, let's assume risk frameworks, let's assume IT security measures, let's assume buffers, let's assume an overall just risk management solution, that it is so-called stress tested. And if I talk about stress tested, I mean a type of red teaming. You're going to be attacked by somebody, how do you react? You can't have somebody sitting the first time at the table when a crisis happens. This needs to be happening much earlier, and you need to feel the consequences, or they need to feel the consequences of their decisions. If they feel that, they know how to react if it comes down to a real crisis and not being taken on the back foot. and that's crucial. So responsiveness is very important, but proactive responsiveness and not retrospective responsiveness. Well, first of all, this is a very important question. The reason behind this is fundamentally, if we can't close the triangle between citizens, private sector and public sector when it comes down to cyber risk, then we can't close the triangle which I call trust. And it's all about trust. So trust means about what about data? How do we capture data? How do we protect data? How do we use data at the end of the day? That's fundamental. How should we do that? Proactively, number one, joint education. Joint education, joint appreciation, and most important, joint respect. Overall, this means providing solutions together, not just short-term, mid-term, and long-term, because nobody is big enough to solve this problem by itself. It requires that triangle. If we have that triangle in place, we have trust, and we can solve problems which are out there. And these problems need to be solved by best practice. Sometimes the best practice comes from the private sector, sometimes it comes from the government sector. We shouldn't be too proud about who has the better solution. It's about working for a nation, it's about working for an institution together and solve the problem. So one important thing to conclude in summary is really the aspect of how technology is currently developing. And if we look into the way of technologies, we shouldn't underestimate actually the aspects of crypto technologies and how these are developing. Whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's machine learning, or whether it's simply developments as far as technology is concerned, the way we use data today. One of the fundamental problems we have is we very often identify these risks too late. Our responsiveness is too late. We always being a couple of hours behind actually intruders. This could well change with some of the crypto technology aspects, such as artificial intelligence. Now, however, what we need to make sure for the society, for countries, at the end, that these particular technologies are working ethically and they're being used ethically. If they're being used in an ethical format, then actually they are an advantage and not a disadvantage. And this is a fundamental, crucial aspect which we need to consider.